what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, Lone Wolf 902. In today's video, we're going to be having a look at a new titanium stove that was just sent to me from Nortent, okay? So here we've got the titanium stove. They've also sent me the titanium chimney pipe, which is right back here. I've already pre-rolled it inside of my house. How I roll my pipes for the very first time is I use just one of those pool noodles that you can find at your local dollar store. Those long foam pool noodles. Put those two together, have a second person, roll it, put the rings on, done, and you'll get a perfect looking pipe, okay? There are no kinks, there's no bends, nothing in this. Very, very simple. Just take your time with it, and it works very well. So Nortent not only sent me their titanium stove and their pipe, they've also sent me a hot tent called the Gammy 4-person hot tent. It's a freestanding tent. Check out my review on that as well. But for today, we're gonna get right into we'll start with the stovepipe bag because there are pieces in there, and then we'll move into the titanium stove and we'll get that set up and we'll talk about the specs, the size, what I like about it, and then we'll get some wood in there and we'll do the first burn right now. All right, so let's get right into it. All right, so starting things off, they do come with two bags. So this is your chimney pipe bag, and then the stove is packed in its separate case by itself, which is really nice because they actually put little buckles here, so you can strap this to the molly on the bottom of your backpack. So down where the sleeping bag compartment is, you can strap that to the outside of your pack and wear it without it getting dented or crumpled or bent inside of your pack, because the pipe usually is the most fragile part of any titanium stove. So love the bag, really nice. Love the packaging, gotta say that, I really do enjoy it. So let's unzip it, and inside we have, so before I grab that, we do have 6 titanium rings that go on this pipe that also go inside the bag. We have the actual damper portion here. So there's these little 3 fins that lock in the stove, and then you turn it to lock it in. It does have a very nice damper, spring operated, so it does stay where you put it. And there's also a little cut in here where you can actually put in a spark arrestor. So there is a removable piece of titanium that you could take out, clean, slide back in there from inside of the tent. I will say it's very difficult to do when it's hot. So I typically do that when the stove's not burning. So when I wake up, I would take the screen out or put it in to clean it. I wouldn't do it hot, okay? It's very, very difficult to do when it's burning. There are also 2 hose clamps that come with it. These are not titanium, these are actually stainless steel. You can use these for putting on top of this portion here. So if I loosen that off, now I typically don't use these, but if you do want to, loosen that off and slip it over the pipe, a little bit looser. And that would be your chimney would go on top, and that would be your clamp to clamp that onto the stove, making it very secure. I do something different, and I'll show you how I attach that to the stove. So I don't really use these. I just use these for basically packing in. So I'll clamp one end of the pipe, the other end of the pipe, slip the whole pipe inside of here, and I find this adds a lot of protection on the head end and the tail end from getting bumped around. So they do come with that as well. So that's bag 1. Let's move on to bag 2. Same deal with the bag. It does have buckles on the top to prevent the zipper from coming undone. And this is a very small packaging, okay? I like the form factor of this. So unzipping the bag, we'll pull all the components of the stove out, and then I'll go through them one at a time. All right, so we got the stove out of the bag. Here's the top, very, very simple. Here's that screen mesh that I was talking about. So this screen mesh slides right into this slot. You can see a bottom view there, slides in. And this is where it's a little finicky because you got to line up the slot on the other side to actually get it to lock into place. And you can see, I mean, right now it's off the stove and it's already a little bit difficult. So doing this while it's hot is not going to be a good idea. So let the stove cool down. You wake up in the morning, take it out, give it a bang off, clean it off, whatever, slide it back in. But there you can see the screen mesh all the way through. And then even taking it out is a little finicky. You really do kind of have to take it off the stove to really get access to it, but I'll mess around with it the more I use it, and if I have any other findings, try to get that in there. If I do have any other findings, I'll do an update on that, on how to get that in and out easier. But very nice design. I like it. I like it a lot because you can clean it from inside of the tent. So moving to the stove now. This is a fast fold stove. So you can see it's not very thick. It's about 2 fingers thick. Pretty compact actually, and very, very similar to the other stoves that I review where it is a fast fold. So open up the back portion of the stove, do the front. Glass in the door, we'll latch that. This stove has 3 windows. Very interesting design. So it has these little swing tabs, just like the other stoves I've reviewed on the channel. These little swing tabs here, they lock right into the corresponding slot on the wall. So down, lock it in, lock it in. There you can see the second window of the stove. And then of course the third is on the other side. So I'm gonna lock all these tabs in and get that nice and secure. And then we'll put the top of the stove on. Now this top of the stove does not have any reinforced baffling, okay? That was the first thing I noticed when I took this out of the package. It's just a really super lightweight plate of aluminum, all right? So there's no baffling. So this is gonna be an interesting stove to test out to see how it handles high heat and cooling cycles. That is on backwards. Put the hole in the back of the stove. That's where your pipe will go. And the same deal, swing these little finger tabs into the corresponding tab to lock the lid on. So it's a fairly simple setup. It doesn't require a lot of time, which is really nice when you're out packing and you're tired at the end of the day. You want to set the tent up and you just want to get in and get warm. Works very well. So like I was saying, 1 window, 2 window, 3 window. Underneath, we got the 2 legs. They pull out on a hinge system. One there, pull the other one open, and we'll get the stove standing on its feet. There we go. So pretty awesome stove. Now let's talk about specs, because this stove is much thinner titanium. I believe the thickness is 0.4 to 0.5 mil. Okay, I'm not 100% on that, but it is very thin titanium, making it very light. It is 1.7 kilos in weight, all right? So that's the stove pipe, the attachment for the top for the pipe, the screen, and the entire stove with all the glass and everything. It's 1.7 kilos, so that is not bad for a generous size stove. So let's get some measurements on this. All right, so the width of the stove, we're coming in at 8¼ inches. For the length, 15¼ and for the height, we're coming in at 7¼ The height from the ground to the top looks like 11½ inches. That's not too bad. And the door, we can open this up, and the door, quite a large doorway actually. We're looking at 6 3/8 by 5 5/8. Very nice opening to get in and out. Very nice operation. The hinge, the handles, everything's really smooth, really easy to operate. We're gonna see how that holds up after the first burn-in. So nice little slide vent there. Like I was saying, the door tab, everything looks really nice. So let's get the top section of the stove on. Goes my measuring tape. We'll get the top section of the stove on, and then we'll assemble the pipe, and we'll start on our first burn. I do have to clean it first. So I'll bring you guys along for the cleaning technique that I like to do to the stoves, because when you're touching these titanium stoves, anything titanium that you're gonna put on high heat, the oil's on your fingers. So when you touch it, you're gonna leave grease and oil and all that stuff. When you do your first burn in your stove, that will burn in. It'll be there permanently. So if you want to keep it looking somewhat nice, it only takes a few seconds to do it, and you only have to do it on the first burn. Wipe it all down with rubbing alcohol. So I'm gonna do that, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. And then once we get it burned in, hopefully we would have got all the oils and fingerprints off, and it should look pretty good. So I'm really excited for this. 3 windows in a stove, pretty awesome. Here I've got the stove set up. You can see I've got the chimney pipe on. Now what I was talking about with those hose clamps, I don't like using them. All I do is I take one of the rings that come with the pipe, and I slide it down as close as I can get it to that metal fitting. Now keep in mind that that metal fitting is inside of the pipe, so it's not gonna go down all the way. It's gonna be very difficult, because that pipe ultimately makes the pipe larger than the ring. So it makes a very tight seal. That's how I run all my stoves, okay? But you can use the hose clamp if you wish. Now all these fingerprints and grease and all that nastiness, take a cloth, rubbing alcohol. I'm just gonna soak the cloth and I'm gonna go wipe all of the stove surface down. So it's very, very simple. Like I said, it only takes a minute. You just wipe it all down. I can already see a bunch of fingerprints coming off. Make sure you get all those little spots, all those little nooks and crannies. Get it all nice and clean, very fast. It evaporates and it's a one-time thing, you know what I mean? You just wipe it off once and you're done. So we'll get this cleaned up, get the legs done, get the side, get the back. You can do the chimney pipe as well, which is I'm going to do mine because I noticed there are quite a few nasty little smudges. And then we'll get some wood inside and we'll light it up and do our test burn. So this is going to be really exciting. 3 windows is kind of awesome. While I'm wiping this down, I might as well explain my thoughts on the 3 windows. I think the reason why they did the windows small and towards the front like they did, when you're burning all that carbon and all of the nastiness coming out of the wood, all that black soot, it goes to the back of the stove up and out the chimney, all right? So what happens, and some of my other stoves, you may have seen this, the back section of the window may blacken, but then it'll clean off really easy because it's just soot. So it cleans really, really easy, but it is there. So my thought on why they went and put the 2 windows close to the front is to avoid that darkening of the glass. I haven't asked, but that's my thought. That's what I'm thinking. I'd like to hear your guys' opinions, what you think, why you think they put the windows towards the front and made them small. Interesting design. I like it. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing because it is really, really neat that they did that. It makes the stove totally different from others on the market. And I bet it'll put out a ton of light as well, which is the really exciting part for me because when I'm in the tent, I like to sit with candle light or lantern light, and this stove is going to put out a lot of nice warm glow. So going to be awesome. Now I think I got all the spots clean that I want clean. Give it one more wipe on the top and let's get some wood inside of the stove and let's get it burning. All right, guys, looks like we're doing pretty good so far. Today's choice of wood is hardwood. So my other stove reviews that I did, I was using softwood for really fast burn because I was running low on light. So I decided to do this review during midday. And I wanted to go with hardwood to get a really nice, long, even burn. I don't want to like flash heat the stove. Where this stove is thinner titanium, for the first burn, I'd really like to just do it low and mellow. So I went with some red oak and I've got some maple. That's what we got going on today. So it looks pretty good right now. Now I do have the damper all the way open. I do have the front vent all the way open. And I even have that spark arrestor mesh screen slid inside of that little collector pipe. We got a little bit of smoke coming out the top. It's only been burning for about 5 minutes. It looks like it's doing a really good job. I can't wait to see once there's a nice coal base in there to see how it works. Now I am noticing on the opposite side, so the side window that I can see right now, half of that window is actually black. There is quite a bit of nastiness on there. So it'll be interesting to see if that self cleans itself while it's burning. All right, guys, so as you can see, the stove is already starting to discolor with that really nice blue and purple, that nice titanium look that I love, and it's starting to creep towards the front of the stove. So to help that heat build in the stove, because remember right now I have the front vent open and the damper all the way open. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to use a stick because it's very hot. I'm going to close that down to about half to slow that burn down. The chimney is absolutely clear. There's no smoke. It's just nice, clean burn going on in there. And already I can see the flames slowing down. So let's close this guy a little bit and let's see if we can trap some of that heat inside the stove. All right, so I dampened that down to about 85% shut. And I did notice that the smoke was starting to build inside of the stove, as it's supposed to, because you're dampening it down, kind of cutting down the exhaust. The windows did start to blacken up a little bit, but now they're starting to burn off. I can see this one's burning off nicely. This thing rips. That is burning extremely hot. One thing I do got to be careful with right now, I do have a 6-foot pipe on here, and it is quite windy out today, and it's blowing around a little bit. I wouldn't normally recommend doing this with your pipe up there, because typically when it's inside of a tent, the pipe's going to pass through a stove jack, and that kind of corrals the pipe. So it will move a little bit, but it'll bump into the stove jack material and it'll stop. So right now it's literally free flying in the sky, just hoping a big gust of wind does not come by. I do have a garden hose standing by right next to me though, so if anything does happen, I can get the stove and extinguish any fire, any kind of danger or anything like that. So I gotta say, this thing's burning really hot, really hot. Now let's talk about thin titanium. I am noticing some deformation in the titanium, okay? So the top is starting to hump a little bit. Here we got a really big gust of wind blowing in through the jets and it's pushing the smoke outside of the stove. I mentioned this in other stove videos that when you burn outside and you get that gust of air in the vent, it forces the smoke out of the cracks of the stove. That wouldn't happen inside of the tent because the tent would be enclosed. But yeah, so moving back to the thin titanium, I am noticing a bit of deformation on the top of the stove. It is kind of humping up a little bit, and as well as underneath on the bottom, because remember, they didn't add any reinforcement ribs inside of the stove. It's just a flat sheet of titanium. So that was kind of my worry, and I was really interested to see how it would work between heat cycles. Now this is the first burn. After this, going through a cool down and then another burn once you go out camping and then cool, kind of like a winter night. So if you're out and you're burning a hot stove and then you go to bed and you don't burn in it all night, I don't, I usually let mine go out. Then you get up the next morning, it's cold, and then you add heat to it again, you go through a hot and cold cycle over and over and over again. That will be the real test to see how this holds up. The windows are reinforced on this, so it does have an inner kind of framework to the window, so you can actually replace the window from inside of the stove. You undo the screws, take them out. So I'm not too worried about it flexing and breaking the window, because the glass on these stoves is incredibly strong, okay? A lot of people worry about it and they think the glass is dangerous, it's gonna break. They are tempered glass, it is very, very strong, all right? Unless you really drop it and you're really rough on it, general use, I don't see it being a problem. I haven't had an issue with my stoves with glass windows. I don't intend on having an issue with this one either, so. I take very good care of my stuff though, so I'd recommend if you do have glass in your stove, just be mindful of that. Don't slam it on the ground. So, woo! Yeah, that's hot. That is really hot, and that chimney is rocking. So, I'm actually liking the stove a lot so far. I am really nervous of this chimney though, and this wind. See if that holds off and we can keep burning. So far, I do really like it. It is working very, very well. The damper is really awesome. It's really easy to control. It responds well to the front vent. Hold that chimney with a piece of firewood. It is responding really well to the front vent and to the damper. And what I mean by that is when you operate it, you see an immediate change in the fire. So it'll go big if you open it up all the way. When you damp it down, it'll slow it down immediately. So that's really nice to have that feature, to know that it works really quick, really fast. You don't have to kind of slide the slider and then wait a minute, see what it does. It's almost instantaneous. You move it and it's bam, you can see what the fire does. So that's really good. I think that has to do with the wide chimney, because this chimney is quite larger than my other stoves. So I believe the air flow, the in and out, the breathing of the stove is a little bit more efficient. And you notice those changes really quick when you damp it or open up the vent. So I'm gonna add some more wood to this. and let it burn for probably about an hour, and we'll check on the coloring and see how that looks, and wrap up the review after we go through a cool down cycle, because I do want to show you guys what it looks like after it's cooled down. If there's any deformation, that's where it'll be. Whew. And I'm interested to see if there is any at all. Now I already know there is some on top of the lid, but we'll have a really good look at the stove and see what warped and what stayed true. So I'm gonna go and shut the camera off, burning this for a little while, and I'll bring you guys back and we'll have our final look. All right, so I've had the stove going for about an hour now, and we're kind of at the same stage for coloring. It's crept up to about 3/4 to the front of the top of the stove. This side that I'm looking at is quite golden. The purple and blues are starting to settle in, and it's performing really well. I have to say the stove is working very, very well. I've been messing around with the front vent and the damper as well, so trying to see what's the sweet spot for the optimal burn, and then where's the cutoff where it starts to struggle. I think I've got them pretty much hammered out, and over time we'll figure out more. But every stove works differently. Every stove wants to breathe differently, especially with different fuels. Like I said, today we're using extremely dry and dense wood. So this is a good solid fuel source that'll burn low and slow. I do have the stove full max right now. So the vent is open all the way. The flue is open all the way, or the damper. So maximum air, maximum burn right now. And it's unbearable to even sit beside right now. Like, the heat coming off this thing is insane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the stove out. I'm going to let this burn. I'm going to get it out. I'm going to get it emptied out. I'm going to disassemble it. And then I'm going to bring you guys back, and we're going to look at all the parts and the pieces, because I want to show you guys the top and the bottom. I'm really excited to see what happens here, because it is still hot. So when it goes through the cooling cycle, it might pop. It might want to twist and warp. We will see. So that's the plan. I want to get this thing cooled down, and I'll bring you guys right back. I just wanted to come in and let you know that it is still, you can see where the heat is what I'm trying to say. You can see where the heat is. It's mainly towards the back of the stove. It doesn't really get hot towards the front. I mean, it's hot, but it doesn't get hot. But over here on the sides, it is crazy hot. So what I would recommend, or what I'm thinking I might do with the stove, is mount it kind of sideways, right? So if I'm going to be sleeping on the side, I don't want the door facing me. I'm going to probably maybe face the door towards my head, like up, and then I'll have to reach in around the front, put wood in it, so I'll be looking at the side, because there's a lot of side radiating heat coming off this thing. So anyway, it's enough talk. I'm going to let this burn out, get it taken apart, bring you guys back, talk about the pieces, and see what has changed during the hot and cold cycle. All right, guys, I got the stove all taken apart. Well, not all taken apart, but I have the top taken off. It is all cooled down to the touch, and let's have a look. Let's see how it made out. So here we have the collector piece, pretty much blue all around, a little bit of purple in there. Operates no problem, still nice and stiff, doesn't flop and flip and flap around and all that weird stuff. So that's good. Really happy with that. Here's the spark piece that goes inside of this. Now this was expected to be warped like crazy. So it doesn't matter if this gets warped, because it basically lives inside of here, okay? It just makes it a little bit more difficult to get in and out. That's the only thing with that, but that performed really well. I didn't have any sparks shooting out the top. I didn't see any sparks or anything. I got the chimney all rolled up. So what I did is whenever I pack my chimneys away, the portion that's on the stove would be rolled on the inside. So that's the part that's all blue and all purple. And then I take the portion of the pipe that's way up high that doesn't get discolored, and I put it on the outside. The reason I do that is this inner piece I don't want getting deformed, because that needs to sit on top of this. So I tuck it on the inside to keep it protected, and then I'll put these hose clamps on there afterwards to keep it protected in the bag. So right now it's just got the rings on there, got that packed away. Save that for later on. The stove top. Let's look at the stove top here. So it did warp a little bit, if the camera picks that up at all. You can see it warping right there. Now that's very common. I wasn't too upset about that at all. Once you get this on the stove, So I'll bring the stove back over here and we'll set this down. This is very common for stovetops to do this. Once you get all of these latches, once you get all those little finger latches put back on, the stovetop's flat. So that portion doesn't really need to not warp. So that right there is to be expected. No worries with that. The bottom of the stove also warped. Now, like I was just saying, when you put the top on the stove, you're creating a box. It's all latched together. It's nice and rigid. Now that we just took the top off, you can see what's happening here with the stove. It wants to kind of tweak a little bit. So the bottom did warp. There's no real good way to show this on camera. It's kind of difficult. This portion here did bow out a little bit. You might be able to tell by some of the reflections in there where the metal's going. It's really difficult to show. But you can see that or at least I can see, that the stove wants to kind of wiggle and wobble. That's nothing to worry about because, like I said, when you get the top back on there, it locks it back into a rectangle. All of my stoves that I've ever had that I burned in, including my other titanium stoves, they do have some degree of warpage. They're going to, okay? It's thin, it's titanium, it's gonna happen. Now, like I was saying, the windows are reinforced. I can show that to you really quick. Open up one side, and these finger tabs are really easy to operate. So right here, you can see the framework around that window. There are little bolts that the screw goes through. You can undo those little nuts there, pop that frame off, and take out your glass if you do need to replace it. Now, I know a lot of people whine and cry, and I hear this all the time. People saying, a stove with glass, nope, not for me. Those people that are crying and whining about that, typically, they don't have a stove with windows, okay? They're just saying it because they want to talk. That's my own opinion. I've never broken glass window in a stove from using it properly, okay? If I can get that latch back in there, we'll leave it open for now. When you use the stove properly, you're not gonna have any issues. The only way you're gonna break this glass, like I said, is if you drop the stove, okay? That's the only thing, and it happens. Sometimes people do drop their stoves, and if you're way out in the back country and you drop it, you may be out of luck. What you could do is bring a thin piece of a steel, a little plate steel. You scribe out to that. If you're really, really worried about it, at least then you can open up this window panel, you can put in a piece of steel and then button it back up. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna worry about it because like I said, I've never had any issues. But if you are worried about that, that is an option. You can bring a spare piece of glass if you really, really want to. But just want to mention that I do have a lot of people comment on, not so much here on YouTube, but mainly on like other social media, like on Instagram or on Facebook. People, they laugh at the stoves with the glass, and those are typically the people that bring 10 flashlights with them on a trip. I think we all know that guy that always has 10 flashlights with them. These stoves do the job of lighting the tent with natural light, okay? So having the 3 windows is really nice. They are a smaller window compared to my other stoves. I am really liking the stove. I do really, really like it. I like the packaging that it came in. Nice padded bag. I really do like it. I love how the stovepipe is off-centered, so it's not in the center. It's off to the side a little bit. So you can have a big frying pan here and then even a cup or a pot up here. So you're kind of maximizing your cooking surface doing that. So that's also neat. I'm really happy with it. I gotta be honest, after burning it, everything works really nicely. Like I was saying, everything operates really nice. Usually after the first burn of a stove, you can really tell which parts are gonna fail and which parts are not going to. I don't see any issues with the stove. I will be using it a lot as well as my other stoves. Trip depending, you know, if I need something a little bit lighter, I'll take this. If I'm not too worried about carrying the extra weight, I'll take something with a really big window so I can really enjoy the nice light inside of the tent. It comes down to the right tool for the job. This is an excellent stove for backpacking and it's very light and it does the job really well. So that's my final thoughts on the stove. I am very happy with it, and if you have any questions, drop it down in the comment section. And a huge thank you to Nortent for sending me this stove, as well as the Gammy 4-person freestanding hot tent, where I believe this is going to primarily be used. It's going to be a fun winter. So like I said, if you guys have any questions about the stoves or the tents or any of my gear setups, drop it down in the comment section and I'll get back to you. Peace out, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.